Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling psychology,
Oh, yeah.
science of mind and behavior.
Sounds good.
We'll be using the Wikipedia article on psychology as our guide today,
Okay.
but I have a feeling we're going to uncover some really surprising things along the way.
Awesome. I'm ready.
To dive in.
Ready to dive in.
Absolutely. And I think what's most interesting about psychology is that it's so much more than just therapy.
Right.
It touches almost every aspect of human experience.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's not just about what's going on like in our heads, right? It's
Yeah.
also how that translates into actions
Exactly.
individually as part of society.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of history, did you know that psychology's roots go way back,
Oh, yeah.
even to ancient civilizations?
Mm-hmm.
Egypt, Greece, China, and India.
It's true. It really shows how long humans have been fascinated by the workings of the mind.
Right.
For example, the ancient Egyptians even documented depression and thought disorders in the Ebers Papyrus.
Wow, so they were already grappling with these issues centuries ago.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
But it seems like it took a while for psychology to become a formal science.
Right. Well, philosophers have pondered the mind for centuries.
Yeah.
The real turning point was in the 19th century
Okay.
with Wilhelm Wundt.
Okay.
He established the first experimental psychology lab.
Wow.
Total game changer.
Huge.
Before that, it was mostly philosophical musings.
Yeah.
But Wundt really wanted to apply the scientific method
Okay.
to studying the mind.
Interesting.
He used these controlled experiments
Uh-huh.
to break down mental processes,
Okay.
kind of like chemists were doing with elements.
I see. So he was really a pioneer.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to measure and quantify
Yeah.
something as complex as human thought.
Yeah.
I can see how that would lay the groundwork
Hmm.
for modern psychology.
Yeah.
And of course, psychology isn't just one thing, right? We've got all these different schools of thought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Psychology is definitely not a monolith. There are all these different perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
and each one has its own way of approaching the mind and behavior.
Right.
For instance, you have biological psychology, which looks at how our genes and brains influence how we act.
Okay.
Then there's behaviorism, which focuses on how we learn through conditioning and rewards.
Right.
And don't forget cognitive psychology, which dives into those complex mental processes like memory and problem solving.
It's amazing how each school of thought adds another layer
Yeah,
to our understanding.
for sure.
And some of them have been pretty controversial, right?
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't there a big shift from just focusing on behavior
Uh-huh.
to bringing the mind back into focus?
You're thinking about the cognitive revolution?
Yeah.
For a while, behaviorism was dominant.
Okay.
Psychologists focusing mainly on observable actions.
Right.
But eventually there was a pushback.
Okay.
People like Noam Chomsky argued that we can't ignore the inner workings of the mind
Yeah.
if we truly want to understand human behavior.
That makes sense. It's like you can observe someone pushing a button,
Yeah.
but you need to understand their motivations, their thought processes to really get the whole picture.
Exactly.
It reminds me of social psychology, too, how
Yeah.
our social environment shapes who we are,
Yeah.
how we act.
Social psychology is fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
One of the most famous studies is the Milgram experiment.
Oh, yeah?
It showed just how easily people can obey authority,
Wow.
even when asked to do things that go against their conscience.
It's pretty disturbing to think about,
Yeah,
but also really important.
absolutely.
It makes you wonder about the power of social pressure
Right.
and how it can influence our actions, even in extreme situations.
Sure.
So we've got biological influences,
Mhm.
learned behaviors,
Mhm.
the influence of our social world. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
And we haven't even touched on things like the unconscious mind
Yeah.
or the search for meaning.
We've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore.
Right.
We have psychoanalytic psychology, which delves into the unconscious mind
Okay.
and its impact on our lives,
Mhm.
pioneered by Sigmund Freud.
Right.
And then there's humanistic psychology, which focuses on things like personal growth, free will, and the search for meaning.
It sounds like psychology is constantly evolving and expanding.
It is.
It's not just stuck in the past
No,
with those old theories, right?
absolutely not. Psychology is a dynamic field,
Right.
always pushing the boundaries of what we know about the mind and behavior.
I'm starting to realize that psychology is really everywhere, isn't it? I mean, we see its influence in education,
Yeah.
the workplace, even in things like marketing and advertising.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll be digging into next.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Before we get there, what stood out to you the most so far?
I think it's just fascinating how each school of thought brings a unique perspective
Right.
and how they all weave together to create this rich tapestry of understanding about the human mind.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's like each piece of the puzzle helps us see the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, let's take a quick break,
Yeah.
and we'll be right back to explore those real-world applications.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the deep dive. In the last part, we explored the history of psychology and all those different schools of thought, each with its own take on the human mind.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much the field has grown and changed over time.
It really has. And what's interesting is that
Yeah.
even with all these different perspectives,
Right.
there are some like big questions and themes that keep popping up throughout psychology.
Okay, so it's not just a bunch of separate theories.
Right.
There are some common threads that tie it all together. Like what?
Yeah. One big one is personality.
Okay.
What makes us who we are? Why do we think, feel, and act in the ways that we do?
Right.
This question has been around for centuries,
Yeah.
and psychology offers a whole range of perspectives on it.
I've always been fascinated by personality tests,
Oh, yeah.
like the Myers-Briggs, but I know they can be controversial too.
They definitely have their limitations.
Yeah.
Some people get really hung up on their personality type, as
No,
if
what?
it's set in stone.
Yeah.
But the truth is, personality is complex and fluid.
Okay.
It's shaped by both our genes and our experiences.
So it's not like you're born an introvert or an extrovert and that's it.
Exactly.
You can change and grow over time.
Exactly. And that brings us to another big theme in psychology development.
Okay.
How do we change over the course of our lives?
Right.
From childhood to adulthood, we're constantly learning, adapting, and evolving.
I remember learning about Piaget's stages of cognitive development in school.
Oh, yeah.
It was fascinating to see how kids go through these different phases of understanding the world.
Piaget's work was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
He showed that children aren't just mini adults.
Right.
They have their own unique ways of thinking and learning,
Yeah.
and they go through these incredible transformations as they grow.
It makes me wonder about how our brains change throughout life.
What's happening on a neurological level as we learn and grow?
That's a question for neuroscience,
Right.
but psychology is closely intertwined with it.
Okay.
We're starting to understand the brain's role in things like memory, emotion, and even personality.
Okay, so we've got personality
Mm-hmm.
development, the
Yeah.
brain.
Uh-huh.
What about the unconscious mind?
Right.
That's always seemed kind of mysterious and intriguing to me.
Oh, yes, the unconscious.
Yeah.
It's been a source of fascination and debate for psychologists ever since Freud.
Right.
He believed that many of our thoughts and behaviors are driven by unconscious desires and conflicts.
Like those Freudian slips
Mhm.
where you accidentally say something you didn't mean to.
Exactly. Freud believed those slips were glimpses into the unconscious.
Wow.
And while some of his ideas have been challenged over time,
Right.
the concept of the unconscious has definitely stuck around in psychology.
So it's not all about conscious thought?
There's a whole other level of mental activity going on beneath the surface.
It seems so.
Okay.
Cognitive psychologists are finding that a lot of our mental processes happen automatically
Yeah.
without our conscious awareness.
Right.
It's like our brains are constantly processing information and making decisions in the background.
That's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how much control we really have
Right.
over our thoughts and actions.
It's a question worth pondering.
It is.
And speaking of actions,
Okay.
another big theme in psychology is motivation.
Okay.
What drives us to do the things we do?
I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Uh-huh.
with those basic survival needs at the bottom,
Yeah.
self-actualization at the top.
Maslow's hierarchy is a classic model.
Yeah.
It highlights how our motivations can be layered.
Right.
We need to feel safe and secure
Yeah.
before we can focus on things like creativity and personal growth.
But isn't motivation more complex than just a pyramid?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, sometimes we do things that don't seem to fit into those neat categories.
Absolutely. Motivation is a complex interplay of biological drives,
Right.
learned behaviors, social influences, and even unconscious desires.
Wow.
Psychologists are still trying to unravel all the factors that contribute to human motivation.
It seems like there's always more to learn.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground already.
Right.
From personality to development to the unconscious mind and motivation.
And it's all connected.
Right.
These themes weave together to give us a richer understanding of human experience.
Yeah.
They also inform how we apply psychology in different fields,
Okay.
from education to healthcare to the workplace.
It's really fascinating to see how these big ideas translate into real-world applications.
Yeah.
Before we move on to explore those applications in more depth,
Okay.
is there anything in particular that sparked your curiosity so far?
Hmm. I'm really intrigued by the idea of the unconscious mind.
Okay.
It makes you realize how much is happening beneath the surface, shaping our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to learn more about how all these different areas of psychology are
Sure.
being used to solve problems and improve people's lives.
Right.
So let's dig into those applications when we come back.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring all these big themes in psychology,
Yes.
personality, development, the unconscious mind,
Yeah.
and motivation.
It's amazing how they all tie together
I know, right?
to paint this, really complex picture of what it means to be human.
Totally. And as we dig deeper into these themes, it makes you realize just how much psychology itself has changed over time.
Yeah, definitely.
Now that you mention it, we talked about the history and different
Yeah.
schools of thought, but
Yeah.
we didn't really talk about how psychology has evolved as a field.
Well, one of the biggest shifts has been this move toward greater scientific rigor.
Okay.
It's like psychology is taking a hard look at itself and saying, okay, how can we make sure our findings are solid? How can we be more objective and evidence-based?
So it's not just about having interesting theories.
Right.
It's about testing those theories and
Yeah.
making sure they hold up under scrutiny.
There's a much greater emphasis now on replication,
Mm-hmm.
data transparency,
Right.
and using rigorous statistical methods.
Yeah.
It's all about making sure our conclusions are reliable.
Right.
That we're not just jumping to conclusions based on limited data.
That makes sense, especially in a world where misinformation can spread like wildfire.
Right.
You need to be able to separate fact from fiction.
Exactly. And as psychology has become more scientific,
Yeah.
it's also become more specialized.
Okay.
We have all these different branches of psychology now,
Right.
each focusing on a specific area of human behavior.
So instead of just having psychologists, we now have
Right.
clinical psychologists, developmental psychologists,
Mm.
social psychologists, neuropsychologists. The list goes on.
Exactly. And this specialization allows researchers
Yeah.
to really delve deep into their areas of interest,
Okay.
leading to more nuanced and targeted discoveries.
Yeah.
It's like each branch is adding a new piece to the puzzle of understanding the human mind.
And it seems like psychology is also becoming more aware of its own limitations.
Yeah.
Like we talked about the weird bias earlier, how
Yeah.
so much research has focused on people from
Yeah.
Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic societies.
It's a huge issue.
Yeah.
For a long time, researchers just assumed that their findings could be generalized to everyone.
Right.
But now there's a much stronger push for diversity and inclusivity in research.
Yep. Okay.
We need to study people from all different backgrounds and cultures
Right.
to get a more accurate and complete picture of human psychology.
It's not just about being politically correct.
Right.
It's about making sure our findings are actually relevant to a wider range of people.
Exactly. And this recognition of our limitations is actually a sign of strength.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that psychology is willing to evolve and adapt as we learn more.
Another thing I've noticed is how psychology is increasingly merging with other fields,
Yeah.
like neuroscience, technology, even economics and artificial intelligence.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is.
These interdisciplinary collaborations are leading to some really groundbreaking discoveries.
Right.
For instance, neuropsychology is using brain imaging techniques to understand the biological underpinnings
Mm-hmm.
of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Okay.
It's revolutionizing how we approach mental health and learning disabilities.
And then you have the rise of technology, which has opened up so many new possibilities for psychological research and intervention.
We now have apps that can track mood,
Uh-huh.
monitor sleep patterns,
Right.
even deliver personalized therapy,
Wow.
all based on psychological principles.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible to see how technology is making these tools more accessible and personalized. It's exciting to think about the possibilities,
Yeah.
but I also wonder about the challenges that psychology will face in the future.
Well, in a world that's constantly changing,
Right.
psychology needs to keep adapting.
Yeah.
Think about the impact of social media on mental health,
Right.
the rise of political polarization,
Mhm.
or the global climate crisis.
Yeah.
These are all complex issues that require psychological insights.
It's a reminder that psychology isn't just about understanding individual minds.
Yeah.
It's also about understanding group dynamics, societal trends, and how we can use our knowledge to create positive change.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been fascinating.
It has.
Really enjoyed this deep dive into psychology.
Me too.
It's clear that this is a field that is constantly evolving,
Yes.
always seeking new knowledge and new ways to apply that knowledge to make the world a better place.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
From exploring the history and different schools of thought to looking at the big themes that run through psychology and the exciting ways it's being used in the world.
It's been fascinating to see how much ground we've covered.
It really has.
And it really all comes back to this fundamental human desire to understand ourselves,
Right.
our minds, and how we interact with the world around us.
Exactly. So as you continue your own exploration of psychology,
Yeah.
what questions are you going to ask? What mysteries are you going to unravel?
It's exciting to think about.
And remember, the mind is a powerful and complex thing.
It is.
And the more we understand it, the better equipped we are to lead fulfilling lives and create a more just and compassionate world.
Absolutely.
That's a perfect note to end on.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time.